Welcome to the Clergy Emergency League first year anniversary. My name is the Reverend Dr. Leah Shade, and together with my colleague, the Reverend Stephen Fearing, whom you will hear from shortly, we are the co-founders of this network of pastors. We want to share with you the story of how the Clergy Emergency League got started, what we've done this past year, and what we look forward to in the coming year. In late spring of 2020, as protests and riots spread across the nation with renewed outrage about racist violence, especially the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, former President Donald Trump touted himself as the law and order president and looked for a way to assert his strength. On June 1st, 2020, he marched from the White House to St. John's Episcopal Church with a military entourage for a photo op in front of the church sign holding a Bible. He was not invited to the church, nor did he ask permission to visit. He deployed armed law enforcement officers and National Guard to clear the church steps of clergy and volunteers who were caring for peaceful protesters. The officers shot tear gas and rubber bullets at unarmed persons who were simply exercising their constitutional rights. The crowd was engaged in public lamentation for the deaths of countless unarmed people of color killed by uniformed officers. They were protesting systemic racism and militarized violence.
Trump was using Christianity to justify a version of law and order that is based on white supremacy. He was co-opting religious symbols to claim an authority he did not have. Cloaked under the guise of Christianity, he was pushing this country to the brink of authoritarian dictatorship and martial law. Because of this escalation and acceleration of incursions against and within the church, Christians must not remain silent, but must speak out and resist.
We started with just a handful of clergy, organized by the two of us, to unite in a way similar to what the pastors of the Confessing Church did in Nazi Germany. They banded together to form the Pastors Emergency League and resisted the Third Reich until it was finally brought down. We believe that people of faith, especially Christians, and specifically the clergy, have a responsibility to stand up to violent authoritarianism that uses the church and the Bible as a staging ground for terror. If we do not speak out, then we are truly lost. There can be no sitting out and staying silent. To do so is to be complicit with evil. We encourage Christian clergy to find their voice, step into their calling, and carry out the compassionate, bold, and justice-seeking ministry to which God is calling us. Throughout our presentation, we're going to share with you some quotes from some of our members who have shared what the Clergy Emergency League has meant to them and their ministry. For example, one of our clergy said this: Bonhoeffer, that is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, said in his book Life Together that each of us needs the other to tell us the gospel again when it has been pushed out of us. The Clergy Emergency League has done that for me.
We spent the months of June, July, and August writing our commitments, focus, and covenant statements. We won't take time to read them all now, but we encourage you to visit our website at www.clergyemergencyleague.com to see them in full. They describe who we are, why we exist, and what is important to us, and what we agree to do in our prophetic role as clergy at this time.
Speaking of our website, it was Stephen who was the mastermind behind the graphics and all the social media for the Clergy Emergency League. And you can see the list of links here. The Facebook group is just for clergy or those with a clergy level leadership role within their congregations. Those wanting to support the work of the Clergy Emergency League are invited to like our public Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. If you sign up for our email list, you can receive announcements about upcoming events. We're thrilled that since we started this group, more than 2,500 clergy have joined our network.
As CEL grew, we began bi-weekly meetings to get things off the ground. We set up a Zoom account, invited clergy colleagues who invited other clergy colleagues, and pretty soon we had a regular group who were helping us strategize how best to carry out our mission of supporting pastors. We quickly realized that we would need a steering committee to guide the work of the Clergy Emergency League, so we invited folks who were regular attenders and represented a range of genders, denominations, and abilities. One of our challenges is to diversify the steering committee even more in the coming year. At this time, we have 5 members of the steering committee who met on a regular basis with Leah and myself to guide the work of the Clergy Emergency League. They are Karen Andrews, Robert Franick, Pamela Griffith Pond, Lauren Grubaugh Thomas, and Nelson Rebel Gonzalez. You can read their bios in the About section on our website. Speaking of Karen Andrews, we are especially grateful for the work he has put into our research page on the website. He has curated a list of 50 resources to support clergy and congregations in their work of becoming anti-racist, practicing nonviolent resistance, understanding and confronting white Christian nationalism, and living out their call to ministry in the public square.
One of the functions of the Clergy Emergency League is to provide education and study opportunities so that pastors can be equipped for their prophetic ministry. Early on, we did this with book studies. We started with the volume that gave me the inspiration for this group, Preaching in Hitler's Shadow, Sermons of Resistance in the Third Reich, edited by Dean G. Stroud. This was followed by a study led by Stephen on White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. As one of our members shared, I have needed and appreciated the encouragement and strength gained from this site. It has helped me stand my ground without hurting those who haven't yet reached this level in their mental spiritual journey. I don't want to hurt them, for I can see myself in them a few years ago. This group has tutored and inspired me, as well as given me comfort.
Another way we provide support is through a weekly lectionary text study that I started for CEL members around September of 2020. These hour-long sessions give us a chance to think about how to approach sermons through the lens of resistance and proclaiming God's justice. As 2 of our members have shared recently, CEL definitely helped me connect with others in the darkest and hardest times. The sermon prep group was also a lifesaver. And another CEL member said the following: I like the Tuesday lectionary discussion. It has opened new perspectives for me and has enabled me to share some of my own.
We also planned special programs to focus on specific topics that come up in our member meetings as areas in which clergy are needing more resources, guidance, or inspiration. Stephen got us started with a conversation with Tom Junod, the journalist whose friendship with Mr. Rogers is depicted in the movie It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Their moving conversation about Fred Rogers and what he might say to us today is available on the CEL YouTube channel. Then in October, I interviewed Lisa Cressman, author of the book The Gospel People Don't Want to Hear, and we talked about preaching through the election season. Also that month, Robert Franick and Jim Antal discussed a vital book for resistance called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder.
As we mentioned earlier, we held member meetings twice a month during the height of the resistance to the Trump administration and in the lead up to the election as well as its aftermath. Currently, we meet once a month on the first Thursday, alternating times between 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern to accommodate people's schedules and because we have members in 4 different time zones. We always keep our meetings to an hour, and our typical format is to open with prayer, check in with each other about what they are doing, what they are facing in their congregations, and share a presentation or engage in a topic-oriented discussion. Then we open it up for general discussion about what would be most useful for our members as they are engaging in ministry, followed by announcements and a closing prayer. These member meetings have been an important support for clergy, especially those who find themselves in more conservative areas or who feel isolated within their congregation or community. As one of our members has said, this group has been a vital light through the bombardment of life-threatening news and soul-wrenching death. I am glad to have had a place to talk about things other groups were content to leave unsaid.
One of the ways in which clergy began showing up for justice was by being a presence at the protests in cities around the country last year. To help facilitate this, the Clergy Emergency League started its CloudOfClergy Campaign, where we encouraged clergy in our network to receive training in de-escalation, protest chaplaincy, and nonviolence. From Portland to Louisville to Washington, D.C., clergy turned out to support protesters, pray, and be a witness to the police violence perpetrated against citizens. We want to give a special shout out to Theodore Soames and our seminary students who started a seminarians chapter of the Cloud of Clergy and did great work organizing, educating, and training, and sharing what they learned with the rest of our network.
This also gave us the impetus to design some Clergy Emergency League swag. Thanks to Robert Franick, who worked with a friend to design items with our logo on them, we now have all kinds of gear available through Redbubble. You can go to the CEL Gear tab on our website to get your very own t-shirt, coffee mug, magnet, even baby onesie, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Reverend Lauren Grubaugh Thomas first found out about CEL in September of 2020. Not only did she appreciate having a group of clergy colleagues with whom to talk about how to deal with the unique challenges of pastoring during the election season, she also offered her expertise as someone trained in nonviolent civil resistance. Through the fall, she gave presentations that helped our members frame practices of liberation within biblical perspectives, and offered us practical guidance on how to prepare for different scenarios leading up to the election and afterward. We've heard from many clergy about how helpful these presentations have been, including one who said, "CEL helped me know I wasn't alone in facing such strong pushback." As Election Day grew closer, we undertook 2 projects to offer tangible and timely support to pastors and congregations. One was a collection of liturgical resources for the election season. Stephen worked diligently with a team of CEL members to write prayers, hymns, and liturgies specifically for the election that could be used for personal devotion and in worship services. We also used this resource for the 24-hour prayer vigil we held from 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. starting on Election Day. We kept the Zoom room open and had people sign up in pairs to be available in 1-hour slots so that anyone who wanted to drop in for conversation, prayer, music, or quiet contemplation would find someone to hold space during this tumultuous and tense time of waiting.
Leah also gave several presentations to help clergy understand the post-election process and offering strategies for preaching in blue, red, or purple congregations. She attended weekly interfaith organizing meetings hosted by Faith in Public Life and conveyed a wealth of information for us through the Facebook group and at our member meetings.
With our network of more than 2,500 clergy, we realized that one role the Clergy Emergency League could play was to issue statements that clearly articulated our responses to the egregious actions of the previous administration, as well as other national events that had implications for clergy and congregations. We've issued statements on the abuse of protesters in Portland, the initial results of the election, the attempted coup on January 6th, and most recently, the Georgia voter suppression laws that are now in states around the country. Our members have expressed appreciation for this group taking a clear stand on these issues. including one who said, CEL served as a reminder that there are indeed folks who care about God's dream of justice. And another who said, CEL has given me hope by connecting me with other clergy that have also seen the dangers of empire politics creep into the church and are willing to denounce them.
As 2021 dawned, and it was apparent that Biden would be inaugurated on January 20th, we began to shift gears at the Clergy Emergency League. We knew that although Trump would no longer be in office, the cancer of white nationalism would find other ways to manifest itself. While the emergency was no longer acute, we need to keep our eye on the long emergency experienced by people of color, LGBTQIA+ folks, women, immigrants, those with disabilities, and others made vulnerable by white patriarchal Christian nationalism. So, through our discussions at the member meetings and discernment among the steering committee, we identified 5 priorities for CEL in 2021: reclaiming scripture and theology, attending to self-care, countering disinformation, brainwashing, and cult mentality in congregations, sustaining ongoing work of dismantling racism and white nationalism, and responding to immediate threats or dangerous situations that may arise which impact clergy and congregations.
With those priorities in mind, we have geared our programming to addressing each of them. For example, in January, we had an author conversation with Reverend Jennifer Butler, founder of Faith in Public Life and author of Who Stole My Bible? A Handbook for Resisting Tyranny. And she helped us think about how to reclaim scripture and theology. To help clergy deal with stress and burnout from the election and the pandemic, we talked with Dr. Jennifer Love, co-author of When Crisis Strikes, and we discussed strategies for clergy to rethink their approach to ministry so that their health and well-being are sustained. March saw our first co-sponsored event. Together with the Wisconsin Council of Churches, we hosted a panel discussion on pastoring in the age of conspiracies and disinformation. We had more than 120 registrants from around the country. The recordings of all these events are available on the CEL YouTube channel.
One of the ways we sustained the ongoing work of dismantling racism was to host a panel on environmental racism. This event was also co-hosted by WCC's Executive Director, Reverend Carrie Parker, and CEL co-founder Leah Shade. Our panelists, Reverend Melanie Mullen, Reverend Nelson Rebel Gonzalez, and Dr. Natasha DeJarnette shared their experience and expertise and suggested concrete ways that churches can learn about, address, and do serious work in their communities to tackle the twin oppressions of racism and environmental injustice. This event is also on our YouTube channel.
So one of the announcements we are excited to make today as we celebrate the Clergy Emergency League's first year is that the Wisconsin Council of Churches has agreed to serve as the fiscal agent for our group. This will allow us to accept donations, which will in turn help us pay for speakers and the kind of quality programming that will support clergy in their ministries. We want to especially thank Pamela Griffith-Pond, who helped us to work on the language for the agreement and to get this partnership underway. So now you can go to the CEL website and click on the link to make a one-time or recurring tax-deductible donation to support the work of the Clergy Emergency League. A little later on, we'll hear from Reverend Carrie Parker and ask her to say a few words.
There are many faith-based organizations out there that address public issues and organize religious folks to put their faith into action. But the unique niche of the Clergy Emergency League is to specifically support pastors who are doing this work. We know how challenging this past year has been for you. We're in the trenches with you, and we want to tell you that you have done God's work. Recently, we posed the question on Facebook, how has CEL been helpful to you in your ministry? And here are some of the things that you said. It has been so good to have a solid theological framework and community of colleagues with whom to process the events of this past year especially. And the election day liturgies were so helpful. I also found the Facebook group to be a safe place. Thank you to the mods for this. Oh, and the Zoom on preparation for the election was incredibly helpful, giving us the dates and possible consequences of each.
We hope this time of looking back on the first year of the Clergy Emergency League has been meaningful for you. I want to leave you with two other quotes from our members who shared how this network has been meaningful for them. One said, "I'm not alone and I'm not crazy." This is a phrase a small group of friends among my congregation grabbed onto in 2019. We aimed to build an outpost in a not progressive area where folks who've wondered about both could feel these truths are for them. Then COVID splintered and separated this fledgling effort, and it made my work as a minister doubly hard. So, weary and a little bit heartbroken, as I continue the work of regrouping, rebuilding, caring, and coaxing and modeling, trying to make space locally where no one has to feel alone or crazy, the Clergy Emergency League has become a place I go to feel not alone and not crazy. Thanks for the anchor into some sanity. And finally, this group gave me hope when I felt despair, tools when they were needed, and validated that the things I was noticing were really happening and gaslighting is real. I love the text study group and the training on various topics. The statements that were written were powerful. I'm so grateful for the steering committee and for this group. And we are thankful for all of you. May God continue to bless you in your ministry, in your congregation, and to respond to God's prophetic and life-giving word.